This podcast is intended for mature audiences and discusses topics that could be triggering to some. Opinions expressed by guests on the show are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of this podcast. I am not a therapist or a doctor. All resources, books, and sources mentioned on the podcast can be found linked in the episode notes. Please note, names have been changed in this story for anonymity purposes. If you or someone you love is being abused, please contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. If you or someone you love is struggling with a suicidal crisis or emotional distress, you can contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline 24/7 at 1-800-273-8255. Please note, some of today's episode involves suicidal ideation or thoughts of suicide. Please take care when listening. Thank you.
You think you know me, you don't know me well at all. Think you know me, you don't know me well.
Here's CJ Bishop telling me about how Victoria's brother and her brother's wife, aka Ted's BFFs and Brad's aunt and uncle, discovered the affair between Ted and Patty.
His aunt and uncle, his wife is the one that noticed. Apparently they were visiting for Brad's graduation or maybe his sister's, but they were here, and Patty and Kurt and their family were, also, of course, involved and at this graduation party. And apparently they saw an interaction with Ted and Patty that they felt was off. That they just must have a lot better radar than we do, because we never experienced that, but they just caught them in a very odd moment, and they didn't say anything. Months went by after this witnessed kind of interaction between Patty and Ted, and one night they were talking to Ted on the phone and joking around and, just kind of busting each other about certain things. I mean, that's just what they did. And I think it was my husband's aunt had ended up saying to my father-in-law, oh, you think I don't know every secret about you? I know a lot more than you think. And my father-in-law was like, what? Yeah, right. You don't, blah, blah, blah. And she simply said, I know that you and Patty are having an affair. And apparently there was just dead quiet on the other end of the line. And he said, how did you know that? And she's like, I saw you at, whatever graduation party it was at the time. She's like, I saw it. And he said, well, if you can see that, how many other people can? And she's like, exactly, Ted. So what are you doing? What are you doing? And the story with that was, my mother-in-law, Victoria, she's just became crazy, and he's very unhappy, and they want to be together, and kind of all came out through there. I mean, ever since then, they knew about it. They knew about this affair. They did choose to kind of side with Ted and support him in it, because they truly thought that him and Patty were going to end up together. They had correspondence with Patty. They talked to Patty on the phone. They have emails, of her admitting to it and saying, that she can't believe that they figured that out. And they were in full support of it at the time, but as some time went on, they too came around and saw, okay, something is rotten here. She's not who she says she is. She is not a good person to be around, and you need to come clean. She must have done a couple things that they were wait, so they started kind of figuring her out. Patty knew it, and in turn, Patty started telling Ted, she was trying to steer him away from even them. So this disconnect with my father-in-law and Brad really started to grill my father-in-law, hey, you need to cut contact from Patty. You need to make it right with your son. You need to come clean. You need to do it. You need to do it. They would just hound him. I guess they felt it's not, we can't do this for you. This has to come from you. You need to just make things right in your family. And he wouldn't, like, all he would do is just disconnect even further from them. And he's been friends with them so long. They were the only two people that were that close to him. I mean, and like, even he disconnected from them, which is crazy.
A few days after we came home from Ted's funeral, a friend of mine was in that group of friends with Patty. Text her and see how they were, see what was going on. And Diana confronted Patty. And Patty had said in a text, and I actually think I still have a copy of it, that she has slept with other people, but she did not sleep with Ted. But the police report and the many, many emails that my sister-in-law has says different.
And do you think one of those people that she was sleeping with besides Ted was Mr. Johnson?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Oh yeah, Mr. John, I said that for years. I says, he is very sweet on you. And she's like, oh, you're just making that up. I'm like, no, I'm not. I said, it's blatant. You can see he is flirting with you. He is all but kissing your butt. I said, you don't see that? She goes, oh no, he's not doing that. And I'm like, everybody can see it. I don't know where your blind butt is, but everybody can see it. But Ted did not. Ted kept it very, very, I never saw it. After the fact, I saw one picture while we were at Disney. She had her hand laying on his. And then, of course, you start putting two and two together. And you see the closeness of Mr. Johnson and Ted and Patty. Yeah, it was they must have had quite a triangle. Because Ted hated Mr. Johnson. They tolerated each other, and then probably I want to say the last 7-8 years, they loathed each other. And Patty was always very famous to really rip up Mrs. Johnson, just speak badly of her constantly. And if you called her on things, she seemed to back away a little bit. But it wasn't very often that I called her on things because I always trying to keep the peace. I always tried to keep everybody happy, and I made no one happy, including myself. I used to tell her, I says, you have got it all. And she used to tell me all the time, oh, I just love my life. I said, you have a man that loves you so much, and you can see it. I said, I wish I had an ounce of that right now. I would be ecstatic if my husband put his hand on my hand. And here he wouldn't, because Patty would see it. And Patty would get enraged if he touched me.
What do you think made Patty so, for lack of a better term, intoxicating?
I think it was a personality that she would sweet talk them. And she would play giddy. And she would like to flirt with them. Do I think she was good looking? She was average. I don't think she was anything to write home about. I know that when Ted and I married, always used to tell me, he says, if you get bigger than a size 10, I'll divorce you. I expect a certain look in my wife. And Patty was none of those things. Patty lived right next door to Mr. Johnson, so there was always a little slight difference there because Ted just didn't like Mr. Johnson because he thought he was a sleazebag, and because he doted over Patty, and Patty, she liked the attention. We were her puppets, and she was in control of all of us. Patty would tell me that CJ would be talking behind their back, talking about us, talking about them, that CJ hated the O'Brien family, hated her boys, couldn't stand their daughter, that CJ would make things up about them. And I'm like, really? Really? But I got to the point where I believed it because I was like, why would they lie to me? And I felt horrible afterwards. And Ted was a flirt. I'll be the first to say that. And Ted used to flirt with CJ. You know, very innocent. Ted was a flirt with all women, especially pretty women. After the fact, after what we found out, it was because CJ is pretty and Patty didn't like it. Patty could not stand that Ted would occasionally flirt with CJ. And it was very innocent. It was his daughter-in-law, for goodness sake. It wasn't like he was coming on to her or anything. And point blank, that's what it was. And so she used that against CJ and turned Ted away from his son and his daughter-in-law. And in my opinion, CJ was figuring it out when things started getting really hot and heavy. And that's when Ted completely turned away from Brad. CJ is a smart young woman.
The night that all of this came out, you know, basically what was said was the whole problem started. This whole disconnect between us and my father-in-law was the fact that Patty didn't like that Ted and I had a good relationship, you know, because him and I were buddy-buddy. Like, you know, I knew I would bust on him about like the stupidest stuff, and I could make him laugh a lot, and he would make me laugh too. Like, he was just funny to be around. I mean, his personality and mine like really kind of went together. And I mean, yeah, he was just hysterical. Like, back when things were good, we had a good relationship, and she hated it. Like, she just hated it. I don't know if she thought maybe my father-in-law had like a romantic interest in me at some point or something, and that just set her off. So then she decided to start all this and these rumors. But it breaks my heart because so many times he told me that I was just like a daughter to him. You know, I remember even one time my dad had called my cell phone when I was over at Brad's parents' house. This was years ago. And I didn't have reception, or my dad didn't have reception on his end. So I picked up the phone and I like stepped into the next room, and I'm on my cell phone and I'm going, "Dad." And Ted turned around from watching TV and said, "Yeah." And at first I kind of didn't get it. And then I said again, I'm like, "Dad." And Ted again turned on. He's like, "What?" And I thought, oh my God, he thinks of me like a daughter. And I will never forget that. And it just breaks my heart now because things went so awry. But he really did, I think of me like another kid to him. And it just breaks my heart. I went along right with it. Like, I'm not acting like the innocent party here, because for a lot of years, I totally took what she was giving me and just like ate it up. Like, I believed everything she said. I mean, I just totally like fed right into stuff, and whatever she would feed me, I would believe it, because I honestly thought she was a person of her word. She always seemed like she was. So why would I have any reason to disbelieve it? Like, she would tell me, you know, really crappy things that my mother-in-law would like comment about me. And a few times I had called my mother-in-law out on that and said, like, did you have a problem with me doing this? Or do you think this? And she'd be like, no. Why? What's making you ask me that? Like, she'd have zero clue. And whenever I would turn around and tell Patty, well, I confronted her about that and she denied it. She said she never said that or whatever. Patty'd be like, she's lying. Like, she absolutely did say that. It was just anything she could do to turn me against, like, my in-laws. She definitely did. We were having people come out of the woodwork that knew Patty, saying, oh yeah, okay, well, since this is out in the open, here's what she was telling me about you, and here's what she was telling me about your husband, and here's what she was saying about Victoria. And we always thought it was so weird that she talked about her friends so badly whenever they were supposed to be best friends. I mean, it was even like, I mean, as crazy as it sounds, one of my best friends, her mother works in a dentist office in town here. And it's a dentist office that my husband's family all go to and that Patty's family all go to. Well, sure enough, Didn't she hear a slew of things about me in the dentist office from Patty when Patty would go to have appointments? It's like, I mean, it's insane. Any way she could bash this family to whoever would listen, she would do it. Her husband, Kurt, came to our home at my husband's invitation, like after all of this kind of started to come out. And basically, you know, he just came over and all my husband asked was, okay, like, what do you know?
I called Kurt about a week or two after. I texted him or something. I says, can you come to the house? We got to talk. He said, yeah. Now, my sole purpose in him coming man to man, I'm gonna invite him into my home. I'm gonna tell him what his wife is. It's not to listen. My dad is a lot of things too. Was a lot of things too. So this isn't. I'm just not shoveling the whole pile of junk onto Patty. We're gonna get through this, and he needs to know. He needs to know. And I said, what do you know what happened? He said, I was checking her phone. This is Kurt telling me. He said, I checked Patty's phone, and there was a ridiculous amount of text messages between her and your dad and her and Mr. Johnson. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, and I told her, like, you know, I'm not going to stand for this, blah, blah, blah. And this is what he's telling me, whether it's true or not, you know, I believe it. And I started telling him stuff. She had saved emails. It was denied. I mean, it was instantly defense. Oh, yeah, well, I heard this. Oh, yeah, well, I heard that. I was like, Kurt, I ain't talking about that stuff, man. I ain't talking about it. Oh, yeah, well, I heard that your dad and your wife had an affair at one point. I'm like, really? Really? And I know who started that. It was Patty, years ago. And Kurt took it, you know, and started spreading that rumor around. You know, it was complete deflection, all this stuff. I'm like, listen, man, this is what happened. Like, I buried my dad over this stuff. I'm just telling you, like, this is who she is. And I said, well, do you know that she went and talked to the city detective? Yep, I know she did. She said, I'm like, what'd she say? You know, I told her, you know, did you tell him anything you didn't tell me? No, I swear. I was like, Kurt, she admitted to the whole thing. He really didn't say anything. He just kind of sat there and looked at me. I'm like, Kurt, she admitted to everything. Everything. It's going to go into the police report. Do you want the detective's number? I'll give it to him. You can hear from him. It's up to you. It was 1 hour on the nose. And after I told him, I just kept going back. You know, he kept saying, I showed him printed off emails. He's like, well, that could be fabricated. You can make that stuff up. That could be fabricated. I'm like, okay. I'd show him another. That could be fabricated. No, I don't believe that. When I finally told him about what the detective said, I must have brought it up 4 times. I'm like, Kurt, what do you think of the detective? This is what he said. You can call him right now. What do you think? What do you have to say about that? And word for word, he said, well, for my own sanity, I have to believe that she's telling the truth. And right then and there, I knew, listen, in my own heart, I thought, I did what I had to do before things get stupid. I'm not saying a fight or anything like that, but before like I get mouthy or irate or whatever, I'm just going to shut it down. So I'm like, all right, well, that's it. I said, that's all I needed. I said, you can head out if you want. I said, I'm leaving. I said, I got to leave the house. I'm going to go do something, you know. And he's like, all right. You know, he gave me a hug and he left. And he's walking to his truck and he turned around and looked at me and he said, how many people from the fire department know about this? And I said, well, there's a couple. He nodded his head and left. And I've only said that to a couple people. And they said, because they're all about image. They're all about image. They don't want to be dragged through the mud. They're all about image. You know, at one point he even said, like, oh, I'm pretty much a victim here too. I'm like, whoa, yeah, you are. From everything I know, yeah, you are. Your kids are, you're the victims, just as we are. I'm letting you know what you're living with, man.
Kirk came over here at his invitation and came totally on the defense. Like, he came here totally knowing, like, he was on the defensive and basically just kept saying, well, we were only friends with your parents because we felt sorry for them because they didn't have family here and they didn't have any other friends except us and blah, 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 blah. And, you know, Brad said, boy, if you put some boobs and a blonde wig on that, you would have thought you were talking to Patty, because that sounded exactly like the stuff she would say. And it's not that my in-laws didn't have friends here. Like, I recall they had other friends, and any friends that they had, Patty never approved of. Or Patty would like steer them away or just talk badly about them or just, put in her crappy input. Like, she made it so they didn't need any friends except for Patty and her family. Just like they didn't need their kids because they had Patty's kids. And that's exactly how she liked it. Is that the kids' fault? No, they're victims in it too. It's not their fault. But Patty knew exactly what she was doing.
As far as Kurt goes, if that's how he wants to live his life, then that's how he's going to live his life. No one can force him to leave his wife. No one's going to force him to do anything. If that's what he wants to live with, I guess that's his choice. My only goal was to inform him, and that was it. I don't hate him. I don't have any real ill feelings. I don't trust him. No different than his wife. I don't hate her. I don't. And I can forgive her, but do I trust her? No. Like absolutely not. Like, I don't even want you near my family. I don't even want you, like, I just don't. Like, I don't trust you at all. I don't. Like, you've lost all that. She's a good manipulator, obviously. She's incredibly deceptive. She's incredibly good at what she does in that aspect of it. But I half wonder, and maybe this is a slam to my dad, but I think it's the honest truth. I think the people that she gets involved maybe with doing that sort of thing, are they maybe a little bit like her? How could you not? How could you want to go along with something so deceptive or be a part of something like that if you're not cut from at least a little bit, even a shred of the same cloth, right? I mean, how else could you go along with that? I don't know the full dynamics of an affair or how it works and how people tick and all that stuff, but it's like, if you know even a fraction of that, what's going on, and nothing registers you to say or do anything, well then, I guess you're just as evil as she is. My dad was, like I said, he was a prideful in a sense. Like, he was a rough guy, shaved his head, big mustache. He was like your veteran fireman. That's the aura he had. He was just a tough guy. He's a tough childhood. He had a tough upbringing. He was just tough. And so, women did kind of, he was a flirt. He was a big flirt. And I think that was his major fault. Not only his horrible pridefulness of him, but he was also a sucker for women. I mean, he could just be led by a string. If he thought that he was impressing a girl or something. That's what, and growing up, that's kind of like what and you always kind of saw that, like, kind of a flirt. Always kind of like, I don't want to say showing off in front of girls. I don't know how else to say it, but kind of in a sense, I don't know, like, just that he just had that aura about him, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it was always like that growing up, you know what I mean? As far as him, he cheated on my mom very, very early. I think it was before I was even born. I'm talking like they were still, he just had my sister, they were still very young, when they got married, and I think he cheated on her once before. But growing up, I never ever had an inkling that he was doing that, and they had worked through that once before, and he would never do it again. And my dad always claimed that my mom would hold that over his head. Any big argument, she would kind of hold that over his head. And
I told Mrs. Johnson, like, about all of this that came out. I sent her a text message, which I should have picked up the phone and called, but I guess I wanted everything in writing at the time. I did fill her in on what was going on, and she basically just said, like, you'll have to just be patient. Like, this is a lot for us to take in, blah, blah, blah. Like, they are our friends. And I'm like, I get it. Like, and I pretty much knew that would be my last conversation with her because they would side with Kurt and Patty. And not to mention, they're neighbors. So they're neighbors, and I'm sure that they want to keep up their friendship and good rapport. But I had thanked her, like, for everything she did for us during that week, and with the planning and all the tips. She was so nice, and I text her knowing that would be probably the last correspondence I'd have with them. And that's fine. That's fine. We don't want any bridges between Patty and this family.
The last time that I had a text from Patty was when I was on my way to the cemetery. Was the last time I had any contact with any of that family or the Johnsons. Everything was dead silent. That whole group of people turned into like cockroaches. We don't see them in town. Nobody sees them in town. Nobody sees them at the grocery store or anywhere. They are gone. They live not a mile and a half from my son.
Kurt, he works in a different part than I do, but it's the same shift. So we still see each other, you know what I mean, once in a while. And you know, he works at a different station than I do, but it's the same shift. And it's kind of weird.
And that's the weird thing. I mean, I used to see her all the time because we lived in the same area. I would pass her driving. I don't see her. Nobody sees her. And it's amazing that once this has come out, how many people have realized that she was never a good person. Like so many people have come to us saying that they've had run-ins with her. Like, oh yeah, like we remember this time and she was just doing nothing but bashing like one of her friends, and we just had a bad taste in our mouth ever since then. Or the truth comes out about someone that you know, then how many other people say, oh yeah, like we're aware. It's just so odd.
At one point after the funeral, my children convinced me to actually see a trauma counselor on top of my regular counselor. So at one point after Ted had passed, I was seeing 2 counselors. And after I told my story to the trauma counselor, because I was having a lot of issues with going back to my house, opening that door, you know, all of those things from the trauma from it. And the one thing that will stick in my head probably forever is she described Patty as a psychopathic narcissist. And when she said that, I said, what do you mean by that? She says, well, this person does not know how. She is soulless. She does not know how to love. She has never known how to truly love. What she is doing is a game. It's a sport to her. Where she gets her high is in the deception, is in the deceiving. She says it probably even wasn't about sex. It was probably more on how much she can tear a family apart, and that she was succeeding doing it.
Glad she continues to seek counseling for it, because for so many years, you know, she was in counseling for totally wrong reasons, aside from trying to figure out what was going on between her and my father-in-law. You know, I mean, Patty really pushed on her that she had a lying issue, that she was this, she was that, and one time she went and got like a CAT scan or something because she thought she had early onset dementia, because that's what Patty was telling her, like, oh, you can't remember this and you told me this. No, that's not how it went, blah, blah, blah. Like she honestly thought she had issues.
Next time.
You think you know me, you don't know me well at all.
Something Was Wrong is written, recorded, edited, and produced by me, Tiffany Reese. Music on the show by the band Glad Rags. You can find them on iTunes, Bandcamp, all over the place. They're also on Instagram, so check them out. I'd like to thank the Bishop family for being so vulnerable and brave. If you want to hang out some more, you can add me on Instagram. I am at LookieBoo, LOOKIEBOO. We also have a hashtag, Something Was Wrong Pod, on Instagram. Also, if you are interested in any of the materials, sources, sponsors mentioned on the podcast, you can check them out under the episode and show notes. Also, we will be having another Q&A episode this season, so start sending your questions in. You can email me, text me, find me on Insta, whatever you want. Thank you so much.
think you know me, you don't know me well at all. Think you know me, you don't know me well. You think you know me, you don't know me well at all, at
Welcome to Virtual Meditation with Shiloh.
Hello?
Today we're working on forgiving ourselves for not knowing the difference between upload and download speeds before getting cable internet.
That's oddly specific.
Repeat after me. I am not my cable internet.
Wait, I don't have cable.
I'm not a bad, it's my video calls, more like video stalls.
Hey Shiloh, there's something...
I will get AT&T fiber.
And I will switch classes until you do.
Slow upload speeds? You're not a bad person. You just need better internet. With 20 times faster upload speeds, AT&T Fiber delivers a faster internet experience than cable. Get AT&T Fiber with no annual contract. Limited availability in select areas. Call 1-877-ONLY-ATT. Check eligibility at att.com/getfiber based on combined internet 1000 wired up and download capacity versus major cable providers 1 gig service with uploads of 35 megabits per second. Speeds vary, not guaranteed. Restrictions apply.